Hey guys, hoping all is well with everyone. So in this video we're going to be continuing the read along of The Secret Zoo, Riddles and Danger by Brian Chick, and we are going to be continuing today starting with chapter 10, and as always I'll be showing you any pictures if we come across them or letters from Mr. Darby, but let's go ahead and jump into it here. So just a quick recap from the last chapter. Noah couldn't sleep and he was really restless just from all of the intense training with the cross training with Tank and the other action scouts with becoming crossers. Then he was just wondering who could possibly be guarding at Fort Scout and what animal could be there. So he went and visited and he saw that Sam was there and they got into a really in-depth conversation, and then we kind of ended it where they started talking about a lot of more in-detail things about the Shadowist and Mr. Jackson and things like that. So let's go ahead and look at chapter 10 here. Chapter 10, The Secrets of the Shadowist. I'm guessing you've heard the story of how the secret zoo was built, Sam said. Noah nodded. Most of it, I think. Let me see if I can fill in the blanks. Sam settled into a more comfortable spot on the floor. The story of the secret zoo, I guess it starts about 100 years ago with Mr. Jackson, a rich guy from Clarksville. His wife died young, leaving him to care for their only child, Frederick. When Frederick was about 12, Mr. Jackson adopted a monkey as a gift for him. Since they couldn't keep it indoors, they built a cage for it outside. In Clarksville, the monkey became a kind of celebrity. People were always gathered outside the Jackson mansion to see it. A rumor began that Mr. Jackson was adopting animals, exotic animals that owners realized they couldn't care for. The rumor jumped towns, cities, then states. More people started showing up. They brought a peacock, a crocodile, a bear, all kinds of weird things. They wanted Mr. Jackson to take their animals. And he did. He did because of how happy they made Frederick. For each new animal, the old man built a cage in his yard. Noah said, Then Frederick ended up dying, right? Unexpectedly, in his sleep. He died, and it was too much for Mr. Jackson to take. After losing his wife already, Mr. Jackson went crazy. Sam nodded. He turned back to the window, hoisted the binoculars, and focused on something in the distance as he continued. After Frederick died, Mr. Jackson couldn't stand seeing the animals in cages, not with the way they reminded him of his son. And the animals were too domesticated to return to the wild. Doing that would have killed them. Out of nowhere, DeGraff showed up at Mr. Jackson's door, rambling about some guy from India, a person who could use magic to help Mr. Jackson build a massive underground zoo, a secret zoo, a place where Mr. Jackson could release the animals. Bhanu. Mr. Jackson found Bhanu and asked him to come to America to build this place. Bhanu accepted, but on one condition. Bhanu was one of us, a member of the secret society, and what he wanted in return for helping Mr. Jackson was to use this world as a shelter, a safe haven for all the groups of the secret society, which were scattered across the world to protect different animals. Mr. Jackson accepted the terms, and the secret zoo was created. Around 10 years later, the dwindling number of Sasquatches in the outside became a big concern for the secret society, and they launched an expedition to find as many as possible. By this time, Mr. Jackson was a full member of the secret society, and he spent a ton of money to send people all over the earth. They found about 30 Sasquatches and moved them to the safety of the secret zoo. But once inside the city of species, the Sasquatches went wild and escaped into different sectors, where they went into hiding. Noah nodded quickly, making the ear flaps on his cap jump. The movement attracted P-Dog, who leaned over from the window ledge to give him the curious sniff. Sam continued. During this time, DeGraff somehow found his way into the secret zoo. We now know that he was the fourth brother. After being so close to Bhanu, Kavai, and Vishal, he came alive with magic, a magic he used to draw darkness into himself. Then he disappeared inside our borders for 6 months. With DeGraff so close, Bhanu and his brothers became more powerful. The secret Arctic town? You've been there, right? Noah nodded. Bhanu and his brothers created that entire sector in a single day. And the Forest of Flight, you've seen that. Again, Noah nodded. 2 days. The whole thing. The secret society was in awe. Sam lifted his binoculars and scanned the landscape again. Noah sat in silence and tried to connect the pieces of the story. After a minute or so, the descender lowered the binoculars and picked up where he'd left off. The brothers' moods changed while DeGraff was inside the secret zoo. They started getting sick a lot. Headaches, fever, nausea. No one understood what was going on. Their condition began to influence their creations. Especially in one sector, the secret creepy critters. That place, it's dangerous. Some say it's filled with dark magic. DeGraff's magic. The animals inside, they're totally unpredictable. Some think the magic has changed them. They feed off each other, like in the outside, and some kill for pleasure. These days we basically keep the sector off limits to people. One of the Forbidden Five. Its gateway into the city of species is constantly guarded, and we only allow animals that live inside the sector to pass back and forth. Why let the animals into the city at all? Asked Noah. Why not just block off the entire sector, like the Darklands? Too many people hope to rehabilitate the animals that live there. Some people believe that the goodness and light from the city of species will burn away the darkness in their hearts. Noah thought about this a while Sam checked the landscape. The brothers got worse, and so did their moods. One day, things got crazy. For some reason, they had a fight. And if the history of that day is even close to correct, you don't want to be anywhere near 3 magical guys when they're brawling. They destroyed entire sectors, and they just about killed each other. Why didn't the secret society stop them from growing in the secret zoo? They tried, but the brothers refused, and they were too powerful to stop. The society could only stand back and hope for the best. Which obviously happened, said Noah. Sam nodded. A few weeks after the fight, the person now known to be DeGraff was discovered and chased out of the secret zoo. The moment he was gone, the brothers returned to normal. The link was completely obvious, though at the time, no one understood it. It took years of research to realize that the man who had breached the borders of the secret zoo had been DeGraff. We learned that the circumstances of his birth were identical to those of his brothers, except that DeGraff was born in America, a world away from India. Noah could barely believe what he was hearing. And all that time, DeGraff was hiding in the secret zoo? Close, said Sam, but not exactly right. DeGraff wasn't hiding. He was hunting. Hunting for what? For the first minions in his army. What? Noah stopped himself. Though he was confused about many things, he understood where this was headed. The Sasquatches, he said. DeGraff spent the 6 months he was in the secret zoo assembling them. Sam nodded. That's the point I've been getting to. His face hardened, and his mouth twisted into a frown. The Sasquatches and DeGraff, they're on the same team. Chapter 11. The Shadows of Degraff. How do you know all of this? Noah asked at last. The wind hissed and howled through the crevices of Fort Scout. Outside, a few snowflakes swept across the sky. On the window frame, P-Dog stood on his haunches, his stare shifting between Noah and Sam. Sam leaned in close to Noah. Get this. One night in the secret zoo, 2 doctors, a man and a woman, were working late. Sometime after midnight, they went for a walk. The entire city of species was asleep. Lights were out, and the city gateways were at a standstill. The sky was cloudless and crowded with stars. At some point, the doctors strolled into Sector 18, a sector for lions, and guess who they came across? DeGraff? Sam nodded. They couldn't see much of him in the darkness, just as the circular brim of his hat and the long folds of his trench coat. He was standing just outside a cave, his back to the bright moon, his arms reaching to the sky. At his feet, an enormous animal lay covered in his shadow, a Sasquatch, either sleeping or dead. The doctors ducked behind some bushes and watched. DeGraff continued to stand with his arms raised to the stars, his fingers splayed. A minute passed. Then another. The Sasquatch began to move. It rolled away, but DeGraff followed it, his arms still lifted, the moonlight still at his back. His shadow continued to blanket the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch went into a spasm, kicking and punching at nothing. For a moment, it became perfectly still. Then it hoisted itself to its feet, rising high above DeGraff to stare down on him. Sam paused, leaving Noah to explore the image on his own. In his mind's eye, Noah saw the Sasquatch towering above the Shadowist, moonlight glinting on its fangs. He saw its chest heaving up and down in greedy, shallow gasps. He saw its stare locked on DeGraff. Sam continued. Then, the Sasquatch simply turned away and entered the cave. Just like that. There was no confrontation, no communication, nothing. The Sasquatch just left. That was when one of the doctors moved, snapping a branch. DeGraff jerked at the sound, spotted them in the bushes, then fled across Sector 18, disappearing within seconds. Noah peered out at his dark neighborhood. Now everything about it was creepy. The trees, the peaks of shadowy rooftops, the spaces beneath backyard decks, the sheds and winterized pools. DeGraff could be anywhere, hiding in anything. How could they possibly stop him from getting inside the secret zoo, a place with 1,000 points of entry? How could that be guarded? Noah shivered, but not from the cold. Sam continued. The doctors ran into the city of species and went straight to security. Security sent hundreds of police monkeys into Sector 18 and alerted the guards on the outside. A guard in the Clarksville Zoo spotted him. And get this, the guard said that whatever DeGraff moved into a shadow, a deep one, he immediately appeared on its opposite side. It was like he could portal across them. Noah thought about it. That's impossible. Then he remembered what Ella had said about the man she'd been standing in the shadows of Richie's house on the night they first discovered the secret zoo. She said that he had dissolved into the shadows. Once on the outside, it took only seconds for DeGraff to escape the Clarksville Zoo. Like this. Sam snapped his fingers. He was gone. Noah waited to comprehend what had been said. "What about the Sasquatch?" he asked. "What happened to it?" Sam pulled his stare away from Noah. "It became." When Noah realized that Sam wasn't going to add anything else, he prompted, "It became what?" Sam looked at Noah again. In a heavy voice, he said, "Something else. Something different." Somehow, DeGraff's shadow, the magic inside it, somehow it poisoned the Sasquatch. Noah didn't like where this was going. He stayed silent and waited for Sam to go on. Shortly after DeGraff escaped, police monkeys captured the Sasquatch in the caves of Sector 18. They locked it up in the city of species. Right away, everyone could tell something was wrong with it. It was stronger and angrier than any Sasquatch the society had ever seen. And there was something in its eyes. An emptiness. Or a deadness, maybe. The secret society built a containment area inside Sector 37 that became known as CA-37. It was a large area, the size of a park, maybe with thick perimeter walls. Over the next year, the Sasquatch continued to change. It became taller, wider, stronger. Its hair grew long and fell out in patches. It sprouted fangs and claws. It was constantly in a rage and killed anything it could find. Birds, snakes, bugs, whatever. It slept in the mud, tossing and turning and kicking its feet, no doubt plagued by nightmares. Incredibly, the world around it began to change. CA-37 started to die. Grass wilted, waters muddied, the trees dropped their leaves. Somehow, just by its existence, the Sasquatch was murdering the land. I know it sounds crazy, but DeGraff, it was like he was spreading his darkness through the Sasquatch. DeGraff's wickedness, it's like a disease. In the end, the Sasquatch became a monster. A real monster with a full allegiance to DeGraff. And DeGraff didn't just get to that one Sasquatch. In the months that he was inside our borders, he got to them all. And for DeGraff, that's only the beginning. He doesn't only want control over the Sasquatches, he wants control over all the animals in the secret zoo. Noah shuddered at the thought. Think of how the Sasquatches have changed, and imagine what the other animals would be like. Think of a lion, a rhinoceros, an elephant. They'd become monsters of unimaginable strength. Think of what millions could do, not just to our world, but to yours. Noah did imagine it, and the ideas and images that were forming in his head were terrifying. Sam said, "This has been his plan from the very beginning. From the moment he stood on Mr. Jackson's porch telling stories of Bhanu, DeGraff wants an army of monsters to storm the earth." Noah could feel his heart racing. Some things were beginning to make sense. Mr. Darby's stories, the secret society's concern about opening the Darklands to rescue Megan, the talk of the entire world beginning in jeopardy, and the urgent need to keep DeGraff out of the secret zoo. How could this be real? How could this be happening? Noah suddenly felt very much alone. He scooped P-Dog up from the window and cradled him in his lap. P-Dog tipped his head to one side, then the other, his nose twitching. He stood on his haunches, sniffed at Noah's chin, then touched Noah's chest with a paw. The remarkable animal seemed to understand Noah's hurt, seemed in fact to want to share it, so that Noah wouldn't have to bear it alone. Sam said, "I don't want to talk about this anymore. This stuff upsets me, and you need to get back inside." Realizing Sam was right, Noah put P-Dog down and went to the ladder. He took a few steps down and stopped. What happened to the Sasquatch in CA-37? Sam directed his stare to the meaningless spot in the yard and became very still. While searching for an answer, he seemed to have stumbled across a memory, and now he was wandering there. Noah would have given anything to see what Sam was seeing, to live as Sam and part of his history. Sam? Noah's voice pulled the descender back to reality. Yeah? The Sasquatch, the one in CA-37. What did you guys do to it? With another thought, Sam said, "We killed it, just like we were going to kill every last one of them." In the deep shadows of Fort Scout, Sam suddenly looked sinister, his eyes hidden in his bangs, his torso cloaked in his leather jacket. "Go inside," the descender commanded. "Go to bed." This time, Noah obeyed without question. He fled down the ladder as fast as he could. And we'll stop the video there, ending chapter 11. But I hope you guys enjoyed this continuation of the Secret Zoo, Riddles in Danger. And as you guys can see, it's getting a little bit more intense at this time. A lot of questions and it kind of seems that every time Noah gets an answer to something, just a lot more questions kind of arise from the answer itself. So it's like for everything we know, there's always more that we don't know. So, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching as always, and please take good care of yourselves, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in our continuation of the Secret Zoo. Take good care.